Any updates on development of Codex? Yes, it's being developed.
Oh, good. We did it.
Anywhere in the VTT? Yes, it's being developed.
Man, we're gonna bang through these questions.
This is an opportunity to kind of give the people the answers that they want, rather than.
Plus, if it's new people, right, it's a chance to be like,
oh yeah,
we're making a VTT. Here's what it is. That's great.
Oh, I think. Well, wait, no. He says when we see our names.
Oh, I see.
When we see our names, that means we're live.
We already passed that.
Oh, I see.
Hello, hey, welcome to the show, everybody. This is the MCDM design team for all intents and purposes. Myself, your humble narrator, Matt Colville, our lead designer, James Introcaso, our senior designers in no particular order, Willie Abil and Robert Georgievich, also known as Jordy. And we normally do live streams like once a month for our patrons on our Patreon. But I thought, well, I've been doing these live streams on my YouTube channel where I build an adventure for Draw of Steel. And one of the things I noticed was there's a lot of people who they know about this channel, but they don't know about Draw of Steel. And so they would ask questions. So I thought, well, we got everybody here in the office. Once every 3 months, we bring the design team together because many of them, if not all of them, are remote in one sense or another. And we get together and do a week's worth of work. And it's really incredibly high quality work because we can focus on stuff. And I thought, well, why don't we hang out with the folks on YouTube, which is to say, you people.
Hi, YouTube.
YouTube.
And just talk about this game that we are in development on. Jerry is saying either ignore me or we're all fucked.
Basically, ignore me.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Hi, everybody.
So, Der Meister says, how has your year been so far? Thanks to you folks, it's been amazing. Like, working on Draw Steel is one of the most... what I said was, if I knew how good this game was going to be, I would have had more fun working on it. By which I mean I was so worried all the time. I spent so much of 2024 worried, were we doing the right thing? Was this the right... was this the right decision? And I should have relaxed and trusted the team and trusted the process because it's been amazing. D20 Play, who is a friend of the product, friend of the channel, says, will there be another playtest adventure?
Probably not, because we're in what we believe is the final playtest right now. So there will be other adventures that will get playtested at some point, but they won't be to playtest the core rules, right? Right now, the core rule playtest, if you have it and you have the core rules, your survey is due Monday at 8 a.m. Eastern time.
That's the 13th,
yeah. And that is probably the last time we will be gathering playtest feedback for the core rules.
Yeah, don't forget, you all have homework.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, Daniel Friedman is like, besides fishing, what are projects that my players show? Those of you who don't know what Daniel Friedman is asking about, in Draw Steel, you when you rest, you take a respite, which is you have to spend a certain amount of time in a safe place. What is it? Is it 24 hours?
Yes, 24 hours.
You have to spend 24 hours in a place where you're not threatened. So this is not spike the door shut in the middle of the dungeon rest. This is go back to Rivendell rest. And during a respite, you get your resources back. But also you can do downtime activities. You can do research. And are they called respite activities?
Yes, they are. So
is that the same as research?
So essentially you get if you were to think of it like an action economy, you have one respite activity you can take each respite.
Right.
And one of those things can be research.
Got it.
Or it could be fishing, right? You can use your respite activity.
Yeah, there are a few different things you can do during your rest.
Right. So I remember when we played with me playing my Memenek tactician, we were on a boat and we took a respite on a boat and I did fishing and it was awesome.
Yeah,
I was like, this is cool. I really liked it. It was neat. It was the first time I had even seen that mechanic. So it was really cool. What other, so you can do things like research because we wanted to sort of deliver on some of the promises of D20 Fantasy that they never really deliver on. Like, I want to make a golem. Right. Well, you can do that in D20 Fantasy as long as you find that one book or whatever. But what about all this other stuff? I want to make a flying castle. It's like you can do that. You just have to do research, and it's a certain number of research points. They call them project points, right?
Yep.
You have to accumulate a certain number of project points, and you get to make one roll per respite. And there might be other requirements and stuff like that. But something like I want to figure out how to raise a flying castle. That might just be several levels worth of respite activities, and you're persistent, and eventually you unlock this really cool thing. So what besides fishing?
Yeah, that's a good question for Willie, since Willie designed a lot of the
Oh my goodness.
non-crafting respite activities.
You can hang out with loved ones.
To what end?
Well, I mean, whether you're going back to visit family or you're meeting up with a partner of yours and whatnot, and you're using that to kind of like revitalize your spirit. What's also really nice about a lot of these respite activities is that there can be complications, and some of them do have specific complications that happen. So like you're coming back to hang out with your family, and they're all like, "Why are you out all the time? What's up with this?"
Right, and that comes out of character creation, and Draw Steel produces a much more three-dimensional character than I think people coming from D20 Fantasy are used to. I don't mean to constantly compare what we're doing to D20 Fantasy. If I say our game, out of character creation, you get a much more three-dimensional character than people are used to. Suddenly, people in the comments are like, "Well, not this one game that I play." It's like, okay, we're not there. So we don't mean than any game ever made. We just mean typically in comparison to the game people are playing. So apart from like catch up with loved ones, what else is there?
Yeah, one of the ones I worked on, there was
community services one.
Community service is good. So you're visiting an area and you're trying to ingratiate yourself with the people. So like you're showing that, hey, you're here to help, not just to save them, as it were. So like you're helping out with their sort of day-to-day lives, and they might give you a token of affection or appreciation for all your hard work.
You can build a road.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love building a road, especially if you're kind of like in a post-apocalyptic sort of scenario where it's all like, okay, these cities are like completely separate from each other. Let's help them like establish trade again so they can start rebuilding.
Well, I like the for me, when I see options like get in touch with loved ones, what I go back to is reading the X-Men when I was a kid, and the fact that there would be this cycle of going to space and fighting xenomorphs, and then coming home and Kitty Pryde going hang with her parents, and there's drama, right? It's that soap opera plotting that people love, that we want to support, because I think it's a natural side effect of having a three-dimensional character.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out, right? Like, there's also mechanical incentives for those things.
Yes.
So when you spend time with loved ones, your stamina maximum increases for a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay,
you heal your soul.
Yeah, I'm refreshed. I'm here, right? When you build a road, your reputation increases, right?
Yeah.
And so there's things like that. You can also learn from a master, which is one of my favorite things.
That one's good.
Yeah.
You can learn a language. If, for example, you are making a sneaky character is trying to impersonate other characters, and you don't know the language of local thieves.
All right, look. I didn't have a lot of time to figure it out.
Your Polder tactician might be, hey, get with the program. Learn the local lingo. I'll teach you.
Oh, that's cool. See,
that's
drama. That's drama. That's awesome.
Not that's ever happened.
I mean, that's why I couldn't go fishing.
If you want to know what it's like playtesting the game, it's like this. Did Jerry just say something? Okay.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Are there any plans to make villain parties from Kingdoms and Warfare in Draw Steel? Villain parties are from Fleet Mortals. In point of fact, not Kingdoms of Warfare.
Gonna put my eyes on real quick.
Yeah. So the answer is yes, in the sense that, like, so in Fleet Mortals we made some specific villain parties, right? Like the Black Iron Pact. You're not going to see those in the monster book, but what you are going to see is a system, a rivals system, which allows you to create them, and it also gives you like a more sort of generic way. So hey, if you need an enemy shadow, you need an enemy fury, right? You can create that. And Willie, you're working on the monster book. You can talk a little bit more about how it works.
The rival system is cool. Okay, so like, yeah, it is a truncated version of each of the hero classes, but at the front, there's a lot of guidance towards like, well, what kind of ancestry do you want for this particular fury? You want it to be a Polder? Do you want it to be an Orc? You can just slot in those traits right like at the front. And if you want to go even further in, it's like, oh, hey, there's guidance for if you want to trade out the signature action for one of your player's signature actions so that you can really, really get under someone's skin and really make them your actual rival. Like, oh, I'm doing what you do, but better, as it were.
It's basically if you want to run a bad guy tactician, but you don't want to build an entire new character from first level. That's ridiculous. So it's sort of like the bad guy version of retainers, right? A retainer is an NPC who acts and behaves like a hero character, but you don't want to run an entire second character. You run a reduced instruction set version. Rivals are the same thing, but for bad guys, I think.
Yep.
In the backer letter, we were told no more packets until the PDF is done. Is the same true for patrons? Well, the patrons get another refresh between now and the finished PDF?
It's largely going to depend on the survey feedback, right?
Sure.
But I think at this point, it's probably done for patrons too. If patrons may so, however, we're here this week, we're talking about what we might do in the future. So patrons may be getting packets for not the core rules, but future stuff in the game.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah. Like maybe the summoner, maybe, well, who knows? Probably not. Eventually, yeah, but maybe not. A lot of people are worried about the California fires. If you were concerned about the people in California who were affected by the fires, I very strongly encourage you to go and look up places you can donate to, because there are hundreds of thousands of people who are being displaced right now. Some of them have lost their homes. Some of them, their homes are just near the fire, and we'll see what happens. Nobody, like Willie is, of all the, like,
close.
Of the people that work at MCDM, Willie's the only one that's near the fires. And he's like, yeah, can you see the fires from your house?
Not at this point. We had like a lot of smoke overhead of us, but right now it's fairly clear. You can look down the street.
Yeah. California is very big and very spread out.
Yes.
And so it's possible to live and work in Orange County your whole life, and the fires that are in LA are just a thing happening 60 miles away. But our hearts go out to everybody that's been affected by them. I think this is the first, I said this at lunch, this is the first fire I can remember where everybody I know knows somebody who lost a house. Mm-hmm. Right? No one I know has lost a house, but that's still crazy.
Friends of the family spent Christmas with their houses gone. It was just literally there just a couple weeks ago.
Anthony Hopkins lost his house. Matt, a bunch of people that live in that kind of Ventura area. Any updates on the development of the Codex? So here's a good opportunity for us to talk about, first of all, what the Codex is. Mm-hmm. I'll talk about that. But then, Jordy, you can talk about what is the current feature set of the Codex now, and where do we want it to be? So the Codex is our name. The Draw Steel Codex is our name for our proprietary virtual tabletop that will let you play Draw Steel with your friends online. So you don't have to be physically together at a table to do it. And that's been a huge priority for me ever since I dreamed up the idea of us doing our own game. I'm like, we have to make our own virtual tabletop. And we were really lucky to hook up with the folks at DM Hub. So if you're curious about how our VTT is going to work, they have their own Discord. They run tests in it all the time. They welcome people to join them. And Jordy is the person here at MCDM who is principally focused on how they are doing. So what currently works in the Draw Steel Codex, and what is left to do? So
a lot of the basics work, right? So being able to run around, being able to manage your turns, being able to do a lot of core functionality. What doesn't work is a lot of the specific implementation. So they were kind of waiting for our last packet, and they're waiting sort of for us to validate the last packet is the way we're going to go before they do final rules implementation. For triggered actions, for various abilities and things like that. But you can do the basics right now. If you have access to the playtest version, you can run a Draw Steel campaign pretty well. Like we as an analogy, we did the Fall Black Bottom at Gen Con, and those encounters took a few hours to do, and like with character creation, we got through that in under an hour in the Codex. So like there's definitely promise there, even with a version that isn't feature complete. And so we're looking to get parity as soon as possible, because our internal goal is going forward for development is as soon as we get a playtest packet ready, it's ready in the Codex. Mm-hmm. And so we should be able to that point sometime this calendar year. We're hoping to get access to more people of the Codex. Or likely, if you're a patron, you'll likely get early access to the Codex before it is ready for prime time for everyone.
So let me ask a question. Like, does the Codex currently know what a power roll is?
Yes.
Okay. Can I make a character in the Codex?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. So I can make a first level tactician in the Codex, and will all my powers be in there right now?
Right now, all the powers I think from the last packet will be in there.
Got it.
And there was a little bit of vehicness with kind of the ancestry stuff, the culture and stuff. But I think that stuff is actually being wrapped up right now, I think.
Yeah. So that gives you some idea of a snapshot of A, what the product is, and then B, where we are with it. We're really happy with it, and we normally just use like Owlbear Rodeo when we do testing and stuff. But probably sometime, Jordy will correct me, sometime in like the next 3 months, we should be able to switch to having our own internal playtests be inside the Codex. But there's always going to be, when we're doing our own development, there's always going to be a lag, because the stuff we're testing it's brand new and it's text. However, the technology exists so that anything we make that's brand new, as long as it follows the grammar of Draw Steel, it will automatically get parsed by. So think about this for you as a potential creator in the VTT. That if you could create new powers and new things, that as long as you use the correct grammar, right? You put the space in the right place and use the right symbol for less than or whatever, that the VTT will automatically understand
just work.
and parse and turn it into clickable, usable game stuff. And that stuff is...
And
it's one of the first things I said when we started working with these guys is we need a parser, and they went okay, and they went and did. So,
and another thing with the codex, I think that's going to make it very powerful once you guys see it, is it is very good at importing maps. You know, all the best out there, but it has its own internal map building tools, so you can sort of build out stuff live, and you can modify stuff live, and it's very powerful.
Durmeister says, "Will patrons get the finished PDF for free?" Yes, asterisk. Right, so I don't know how much. Like, how much does anybody remember what we charged for the Heroes book?
$40.
So it's $40
for the PDF.
So 1 month of patronage is $8. So what's 40 divided by 8?
5.
It's 5. So and we don't know when this is, so don't ask because we have no idea. But whenever the PDF is done, everyone who has been a patron for the past 5 months will get it for free. But is it free? You paid $40 for it. That was what the last 5 months of $8 was. So that's our attitude. Our attitude is like, you already paid for it. Here it is. So that's our attitude toward basically everything we make for the RPG, is that when we do a new class, like the Summoner we talked about this week, or a potential Wizard class, stuff like that, because the patrons, first of all, the patrons will get the playtest version of it, because they're a part of our playtesting pipeline. But then the patrons will get the finished, laid out, arted PDF for free, because as long as you've been a patron for X number of months. And we've already seen people, I think we've seen 1 or 2 people try to figure out, well, when should I join in order to get that? And they don't get a good answer because we don't know, right? We can't tell you, well, you better join by this date if you want to get it for free, because we don't know when the PDF's going to be done. Right. So it's just rewarding those people who got on the train today, rather than the people that want to try to game the system. Good luck. If you can figure it out, then you get the PDF for X number of months. Is there an expected date for the PDF?
Well, that's part and parcel with what you just said, right?
There's an expected date, which is somewhere like Q3, I think, of this year. Right, is that right? January, February, March.
Yeah,
April,
it might
May,
be
June,
late Q2, early Q3.
Yeah, middle of the year, sometime summerish is what we're hoping for. But no one here will be surprised if it's the only reason. The only reason I sort of feel like it's going to happen is because we've hit all of our dates up until now. Now, that required people working their ass off, right? But like when we went to crowdfunding 2 Decembers ago, we were imagining we would drop the first version of the finished rules before we went on vacation in 2024, 25, and we did. So somewhat astonishingly, we're still on track. So the opportunities for things to go wrong now, so that the dates will slip, tend not to be, oh, we need more time because we have to revise the core rules. No, they tend to be, we need more time because a ship got stuck in the Suez Canal and now we can't afford to buy paper, right? That kind of stuff. Well, so that's the uncertain future we're now looking at. Is there Nicholas Morris asks about, is there language and folklore in development yet? Well, I don't know. Like folklore is just culture, and there's an enormous amount of cultural information in the current rules, especially if you go to the back where the gods and religion section is. But there's a relatively robust list of languages. We have our own internal language trees that we have built out. I don't know if those are going to be in the book or not, but we use those language trees to figure out, all right, what language do these giants speak, right? So that's I think that's the answer to that. No. Can you remember what the game was like a year ago?
Yeah, because at this time we had released our first packet to patrons a year ago. Right, we had just finished up the crowdfunding campaign. We'd released the first packet, 2d6, no power roll yet. Wow, the power roll was developed in the last year. That is pretty incredible. There was, things were a lot different than they are now. And even then, probably like 6 months before that, the game was even more different, right? We were using funky dice and all kinds of stuff. So the game's been through a lot of iterations. And one thing that surprised me is because it was so different at the beginning, I went to make a changelog for this version for the backers, right? The backers get packets less frequently than the patrons because we want to give the backers more polished stuff, right? Because we don't want to bother you with a lot of updates if you're a backer. And so we put out a backer packet in like early September, right? And I went to look and I was like, oh, it probably isn't that much stuff that's changed. And it was like, I might as well not do this because and just say read the game. And that's basically what we did.
That tells you a little bit about how we do testing and how we deploy things to our testers and our patrons and the backers. Is that normally there's a change log saying, hey, this is what's changed since the last time you looked at these rules. Right. So this is the exception. There's too many things have changed. Yeah. Somebody asked a question upstream about how did we develop the action economy initially? Right? How did we figure out what the right action economy was? And Pesto says, looking back, are there any sacred cows that you weren't able to shake, or ideas that you booted because you thought they were sacred cows that you can't fit back in now? And this is only these two questions are only tangentially related, but like I just assumed that we were going to use a move and attack combo, right? That's a proven winner and it works, and everybody. And if you go and you buy a completely non D20 fantasy, if you play Gloomhaven, right? Gloomhaven, you can move and you can attack, right? And then there are always rules for can I move and move, right? There are some games I played where you can attack and attack, and so we started there when it comes to the action economy, but only over time did we realize we needed more, right? And it was just serving that need. So is that a sacred cow? I don't think so. Sacred cows are things that the only reason you hang on to them is because of tradition. This is not that. This is, it's a proven winner. No reason to rock the boat there. Are there any other things that like sacred cows that we weren't able to shake? Anything that's kind of like part of the legacy of D20 fantasy that we're like, well, we're stuck with this.
Yeah. It's funny, we do a lot of, there are things we do in the rules that if we were developing this game in a world without D20 fantasy, right, we wouldn't have to do. There's a lot of explaining, this doesn't work the way you think it does, or this doesn't work the way you expect it to, which I thought we wouldn't have to do because I thought people just read the rules. But that has allowed us to shake a lot of those things, right? Because it's been like, well, we really don't want these, and let's just explain to people why we don't want to have something like this in the game. And I think we've done pretty well because I feel like our reaction to things is like, oh, we shouldn't do that. I think I'm trying to think back if there's anything really specific about like, we weren't able to get away from certain things. I
think it's mostly the number of sacred cows that the community had that they didn't realize, like the fact that the game doesn't use a D20.
Yeah.
Right? Freaked people out. And
really
that surprised us. We're like, who cares? Like, who cares? like Warhammer doesn't use the D20, but people play that, right? So yeah, there was a lot of that. And us kind of being like, I guess we have to explain why we're doing it this way. But that's also a result of us being surprised at how many people in our audience have it's not just that they only ever played D&D. They've only ever played 5th edition. They don't even know why that game works the way it does. So there would be stuff where we're like, but this is like, people would ask, why did Matt, this is down to the setting, why did Matt do this thing with gods and saints? And I'm like, that's from the Dungeon Master's Guide. That's right out of the AD&D. Did nobody read that? Like the AD&D Dungeon Master's Guide explains, right, that how it works being a cleric from the levels like 1 to 20, and how you start off doing something that's not that different from what a wizard does. That when you're an acolyte in a church, you're just going through the motions and magic happens. But then eventually when you pray, there is some intermediary between you and the god that's paying attention to you because gods are busy, right? And it could be this, it could be that, it could be a saint. And then eventually you're high enough level that the god knows you. And now all that text is in our game. And I'm like, that's just right out of D&D. So there's a lot of stuff that's like, it's, us trying to instantiate D20 fantasy in a way that just makes more sense, if that makes sense, or that is more comprehensible.
Yeah.
Will minis and maps be central to gameplay? Yes. Yep. I mean, you don't have to use minis. You can use, the orcs are Fig Newtons and the heroes are M&Ms.
It's pushing lead in quotes.
Yeah. But absolutely. I mean, I did a whole video about prep can be actually easy and fun, and that's start with a map. Start with a dope map, and you're like, oh, that map is beautiful, and now I want to build an encounter for it. That's not the only way to do it, but this is a very specific question from Zoe McDonald. Do you think the Void Elementalists, there is no space between, will survive the next round of updates? I, as a VE, which is a
Void Elementalist?
As a Void Elementalist, I was going to say, found it extremely fun, but I've seen people worry it trivializes challenges.
Yeah, so there is no space between is basically an at-will creation of portals, right? Where you can create a portal and you can go from here to here. And I think there's so many things, right? The shadow can teleport at will. There are a lot of ways to get around. In fact, this came up during I want to say, Jordy, your interview when we were interviewing for the gig, because we were talking about like, should you be able to fly at first level, right? If you are a Dragon Knight, Dragon Knights, our team really wanted them to have wings, and we were like, yeah, but that, like, if we have wings and you can't fly, people are going to be mad about, right? So we had this whole thing, and Jordy was like, well, but you can teleport, right? You can move all over the map. And so we thought about like, is trying to cross a chasm that's it. That's the only challenge there is. Is that part of Draw Steel? Or is it like, actually that seems more like a dungeon crawly type challenge. And we ultimately landed there and we said, if you're trying to cross a chasm, the challenge is because like it spews out jets of lava at random undetermined intervals and things like that. And so no, we don't, I don't think that, and granted, the example I just gave, I'm realizing can be trivialized still by there is no space between, right? But it does mean that like, you can only teleport a certain amount, you can only go certain places. We actually need to see in the feedback, right, and go there, but we've been playing with it for months. That ability has been in there for a long time, and it's great, and it's one of the things that I think, because you can't do it in a lot of games that people are used to playing, right? They see it and they assume it's overpowered, right? We get a lot of things where it's like, well, I can't believe you can do this at first level because it's a 5th level spell in D&D. And it's like, yeah, but our game isn't D&D. Our game works differently. Our game expects different challenges. And so I think it's here to stay. People really, really love it. And also, Duroc will probably murder me if we get rid of it.
Duroc's been saving our butt.
Yeah, it's super fun. It's super fun watching him playing a Void Elementalist and figuring out ways to save our bacon. Somebody asked a question upstream. I apologize. Your name got scrolled. YouTube doesn't let us have an infinitely long chat. Asking how many respites per adventure, right? And that is a so for those of you who don't know, in Draw Steel, as you play, you are accumulating victories based on defeating encounters, defeating challenges, whatever those challenges are. They can be negotiation, can be montage. You could fight a battle that rewards you with more than one victory, right? You could fight a battle where you had to retreat from the bad guys, but you got the Holy Grail, and so you still got a victory. And so you're getting victories. And at the beginning of every encounter, you get heroic resources based on your victories. So the longer the adventure goes, the more powerful you are, because the easier it is for you to buy your dope abilities. But at the same time, your stamina your number of recoveries, which is how many times you can heal, is going down, right? So victories is going up, number of recoveries is going down. And the way you get your recoveries back and get all your stamina back is to take a respite. But that resets your victories, and your victories then, when you take a respite, convert to XP. So that's the core rinse and repeat of Draw Steel, is that the encounter gets cooler and cooler as you play because you're accumulating more heroic victories, more heroic resources. The adventure gets cooler and cooler as you go because you're getting more victories. But the cost is sooner or later you have to stop. And like the very, very first time we played with this mechanic, Lars, who was playing the Shadow, was completely out of recoveries. But we were all, including Lars, we were full of victories. And there was a decision point where like, either we go through this portal and end up on a Time Raider ship, or we rest, right? And we're like, don't we all I want to fight the Time Raiders with all of these dope-ass victories we have. And so we made the decision not to rest. But the question then becomes, how many rests, because rests are when you convert victories into XP, how many rests is one level? Or one adventure? And the answer is
between 2 and 3 about. So it takes you 16 victories to 16 XP to level up, right? And we want there to be some choice on the player's part. We want to have that moment where you're getting ready to step through the portal, right? And say, should we do this? Should we not? And it seems like when you're getting to around 5, 6 victories, right? That's the point where generally you're running out of recoveries. Now, you might have gotten those 5 to 6 victories from doing all negotiations, right? Sure. And then you're full up on your recoveries. We don't expect that to happen. We give a lot of director advice about pacing and combat and stuff like that. And so that's where we think you'll end up, is that by the time you are leveling up, you'll probably be taking, 2 to 3 respites since your last level up. That's the thought. Now, you can, because there are those respite activities we talked about at the beginning of this, you may choose to take a respite or more than one respite in a row, right? Respite's 24 hours, so you could take one, then take another one, then take another one, right? Because maybe, hey, I want to put a dent in this crafting project I'm making, or I want to spend a lot of time with my loved ones, or I just really want to catch this fish so bad, and I keep failing to do so. So you may elect to take more because there are things you can do when you are resting that are fun and interesting, and we hope that people do that, because then there's the tension of, okay, well, if we rest, we can do this research and figure out how to make a flying ship, but it also means that the bad guy never stops, right? And so the villain gets a chance to do whatever they're doing and continue on with their plot if you take a long time and hang out and rest.
Let's see. I'm trying to find a good question. Are there any rules or tenets you've agreed upon for adventure design and Draw Steel? I would say that the number one rule is imagining the bad guys complexly.
Yeah.
Right? That if you're going to fight goblins or whoever the bad guys are in the adventure, that you as a player are rewarded if you think about them as more than just a stat block. Right? You can absolutely play Draw Steel and just grind through stat blocks and have fun playing effectively a board game.
100%.
But the adventurers are going to assume that the goblins are their own. They're three-dimensional people, just like your characters are, and they have their own motivations. And that if you want to negotiate with them instead of fight them, you can. And so if you want to know what a good Draw Steel adventure is like, I recommend going and playing or just reading the Siege of Castle Rend, which is the adventure in Kingdoms and Warfare. And it is an adventure where it's a sandbox adventure where the players are told at the beginning, the bad guy is coming with an army to crush you and all these little towns that rely on all these innocent people that look to you guys for leadership. The bad guy, Lord Saxton, is coming with an army. He's going to crush you guys. And you can fight Lord Saxton, and you can probably beat Lord Saxton, but while that's happening, his army is going to be killing thousands of innocent people. So you need an army. Where are you going to get it? Well, here's the map of the area, and there are elves up here, and if you can help them out and talk to them, they don't really like humans that much. They're kind of suspicious, but maybe they'll make an exception for you, and maybe they're busy right now. It's like, well, we'd like to help, but we have all of our elite archers are tied up in the north because there's a black dragon on our borders, and all of a sudden the players' ears perk up, and they go, black dragon, a black dragon. What if we help you with a black dragon? And the elves was like, well, then we will give you our units of archers. Right? That is a Draw Steel adventure. There's all these different factions on the map. They're all dealing with their own storylines, right? Some of them are good guys, some of them are bad guys, some of them are in the middle and can go either way. And sometimes just going and finding an NPC and convincing them to do nothing is a major victory. Because if we can get the Necromancer to just sit this out, then that denies Lord Saxton power. I would say that is, it's just taking the series of videos I did on politics and projecting it down into the individual psychology, right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Is that a good answer?
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Is there a reason that Storm Whites had the restrictions on becoming a hybrid removed? I don't even understand the question. Does anyone understand the question?
Yeah. So
And as the author of the...
it used to be that the hybrid ability gave you a lot, right? And so we had a restriction on when the rage would happen. And now hybrid is just sort of a particular option in your sort of state. And we sort of removed the animal keyword being dependent. And so we just made it a little bit more freeform when you become a hybrid. But there are additional benefits when you go up in range. So it just made it kind of easier to sort of track.
That's a big, like whenever we find something doesn't work, we try to find ways to do what we wanted to do anyway, using different mechanics, right? This is a great question from Gerald Duncan. Says, what do you think makes a good concept to build a new character class around? I think it's a great question. Like where do new, I want to hear from everybody, but for me, there's a lot of different ways you can come up with a new idea for a character. Some of them is just a cool mechanic. You have a cool idea for a gameplay mechanic that is a specific character archetype. Like it would be cool if there was a character that could do X, and then you work backward to figure out, all right, well, how would that work in Draw Steel? And then the other way is you have some archetype that everybody already knows. That does not have to be a gameplay archetype. It could be a character archetype, right? I want to play a character that does this kind. We've we talk about this internally. Where is our Flash character? Where is our Speedster character? Who does that? Is that the null? Is that a null subclass? Or is it sort of, well, you can sort of get there with a null subclass, but we should make a class that's just all I have is reactions and I'm the ultra fast, right? So that's, sometimes it's a character archetype. Sometimes it's a gameplay chunk. What do you guys think?
There's more than one way to storm a castle. Like, you're 100%. Finding inspiration from somewhere and you're tackling the problem. Like, well, I want to make something new. Where do I start, right? A lot of my sources come from other games that I play. I'm like, what would it look like in the context that I'm working in right now? How do I bring what works and feels good about this particular like set of systems and subsystems in this game I'm playing right over here, and bring it into this cool ass game I'm already working on, so to speak. Another one is like, oh, this character I really like from fiction is super cool. Like, here's what I think Rangers should be in particular. And I'm like, okay, so how would I work on it from there? It's just like a starting point. And then you kind of like follow that trail down until you have something you can play with and you can like break down why that does or does not work.
Yeah, we have a pretty broad set of fantasies, I think, that we covered by our current classes, right? So I think part of it is trying to see if there's a fantasy that isn't necessarily a perfect fit that you can build an interesting engine around. You know, I think about engines. It's like when the player is sort of managing the heroic resources and abilities, can it create like a fun dynamic they sort of build up towards, right? And I think there's a few we've talked about on deck for the next time that sort of have that sort of stuff going.
Yeah, and I think that's where you get into what is the difference between a class and a subclass.
That's right.
And it's like, do we have any existing engines that we can swap the body out for, right? And it's like, this, may work. And there's also times where we will think of stuff, this is a conversation that's happened in the past. I don't know that we're going to do it. We have a class called the Censor, right? The Censor is very much like the Illrigger in the sense that, like, they place a judgment upon someone, right? And then they can attack that person and the judgments mess with them and they can pull them around or they can teleport to them, that kind of thing. And so then it became like, well, if we have an Illrigger, is that a Censor subclass? Or does the Illrigger use the same engine, but they have a bunch of their own subclasses and, that kind of thing? Because that's also an okay way to do it. So, and we'll see. We don't know yet which one of those it's going to be or how it's going to work. But so yeah, it's really fun to think about classes and to think we have so many places where something could fit, right? Something could be a kit, something could be a culture.
There's that too. I mean, most designs, most systems do also have, I don't want to call it a half-life, but like a certain amount of times it'll work and like a certain scale that it works. And it's like, okay, this might be better fitted towards something that's one and done, like a kit. So.
Yep. And also sometimes there's if you're only looking at the game mechanics, you would say, well, this is a subclass. But then you have to think about the audience. And like, does the audience want this dope-ass fantasy to just be a fraction of some other class's shtick? No, they want... So, like, for instance, you can sort of get to something approaching, Quicksilver or the Flash, a speedster character, with a couple of the subclasses we have. But does that deliver on the Flash fantasy? Like, if you want to be the Flash, is that just you're a type of null? No, because I don't think the Flash thinks of themselves as like a martial artist character, right? So that's part of it. Is sometimes like, we could do this as a subclass, but is that what the people want? Is that what, and when we say the people, we mean like us, basically, though that part of the audience that we also represent. Experiment says, I'm way behind on chat, so I apologize. Just played for the first time last night. If you've played this game, let us know what you thought. Said, just played for the first time last night. The Bay of Black Bottom went great, and each player felt heroic. You're my new favorite person, Experiment. It's great because we have our own Discord, obviously, and we have a Draw Steel General channel, DS_General, for people that are not patrons and just want to ask questions about the game. And then we have a patron channel, and you see people in both show up, and they're like, I don't know, I don't understand any of this stuff. I'm really frustrated, and it seems if you just read this post that this person does not like this game, right? And the person thinks this game is unfigure-outable, right? And then you'll see all of these people talking about, we played last night for the first time, my players had a blast. And the great thing is that creates this dialogue where people are eager to help that person. They're like, what was it you guys got hung up on, right? And like, well, it seems like, the funny thing is often it is the case that people, if they bounce off of the rules, I think probably it's because there's no illustrations, there's no diagrams, there's no iconography or anything like that, but they don't know that. They just think made a good faith effort to read these rules and I can't figure this out. And they think, oh my God, this is way too complicated. But when there are like-minded people in chat who want to help them and they say, what was the problem? It turns out usually it's like one thing. It's just one thing they got hung up on, and when people are like, oh, it works like this, imagine this, they go, oh, I get it, and then they go back and they have a great time. So if you're curious about our game, please come by our Discord, because there are a lot of people out in there that have already played it, are playing it, and are having a blast with it, and they want to answer your questions. Siddharth, speaking of which, Siddharth0922 says, we had a downtime session, respite last night, super fun. Players did discover lore and go undercover.
Yes.
Yes.
That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, that's one of the ways that you can do research. So, right, obviously you've got going to the library, opening books, right, reading stuff. But another way you can do research is you go undercover, right, as your respite activity.
T. Ashley Jenkins, actual question. It's important to stop noodling and release eventually. But if you had infinite time, what parts of the game would you personally have liked to have kept experimenting with?
Oh, wow.
I think the only thing I can think of, because I feel like when we threw stuff out, it's because it didn't work.
Okay.
Right? So I don't have like a huge backlog of, I wish we could have made that work. It's like, well, we tried it and couldn't make it work. Usually when we say we couldn't make it work, we mean with the existing system we had been spending time developing, right? You can make almost anything work if you build an entire game around it.
Yeah.
But for me, it was the wizard. It was like, I wish, because I gave up on the wizard before these guys got here. And I'd already done a couple of rounds on it. And to a certain extent, the elementalist is the result of the work I did on the wizard. But yeah, I was like, I wish we could have made, because I don't think of Pinna as an elementalist. Now, if we don't crack the wizard problem eventually, then yeah, she's an elementalist. Who cares? But it would be nice if we could have a classic wizard/mage character, and there are people here that think they can make that happen. So we'll see.
It would be nice.
Wouldn't it?
What about you guys? Is there stuff that you're like, oh God, I wish we had another 6 months, then we could have done this.
I mean, for me, right, it's hard not to say everything, in the sense that, like, I think you're always thinking about, like, we could continue to refine this. We could continue to find all the little bugs, the nooks and crannies, right? But I think we're there, right? We're reading this last playtest packet. We've really gotten to a place where it's like, we're starting to understand that. There's definitely classes that we've left behind, that I wish that we had more time to do. And the good news is we do. Right, they're just not going to be in the core book, but you're going to see some of them end up in other places. The Summoner was one that we had started down a road, right? The Beast Heart was one where we had started down a road, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we had a prototype. I don't think we ever. No, we didn't play it, but I showed it off on stream at one point for the operator, right? And actually, it was me coming up with the operator that caused James to think, you know what, we need to make it so that your class resource can be more boutique. Because we were going down a road where the class, your heroic resource, was going to be a lot more samey, and the operator was just so cool and different. It's like, well, if we do that, then we can't have this. So actually, I would say, no one's asked this, but one of the things I am most impressed by in this game is the fact that James got the system to a place that I wanted it to be, where I was like, look, there should be lots of ways for you to generate your heroic resource, right? There should be some that are reliable. You get X per turn and you can rely on it. And then there should be some boutique, like if I do this, if this happens, if something like with the Troubadour, if a player character dies, like just actually dead, you get 10 drama, right? That kind of stuff. And I thought that was one half of the equation. The other half of which is there are some known good ways to spend your heroic resource. You have a 3-cost ability, you have a 5-cost ability, but there are also all these little 1s and 2s where if I do this thing, I get X, but if I spend 1 heroic resource, I get X plus. And we got there. And that was so important to me, but I'm the design director, he's the lead designer, he made it happen.
Well, and credit where it's due, right? That code really got cracked once we expanded the design team, right? So once Jordy and Willie came on, that was really the point where, because I was sort of like, all right, I can do this for 4 of them. And now I'm out of ideas, right? And so we really cracked that code, because then the other thing we cracked, which is the other part of heroic resources, like everybody should have a unique thing to kind of do with it, right? So like if you're a Fury, if you bank your stuff, you get better and better and better, right? Like, and then it's like, now I've built up all this rage, and if I spend it, I might not get all of this stuff. So there's that decision point to make. If you're a Shadow, right, you can uniquely discount your resources when you have edges on your attacks with heroic abilities, your strikes, right? And so those are the kinds of things that once we put that in, it was like, okay, now we have these 3 dimensions. How do you spend it? How do you gain it? But also, what's the unique thing? How do you uniquely interact with your resource? And we could not have done that without everybody on this team right now. So thank you.
Sure.
How capable, asks Chrome Toaster II, is a level 10 draw steel character compared to a level 20 D20 fantasy character?
In comparison.
Yeah. I mean, I think the answer, right, is that in terms of power, right, I think draw steel heroes are more powerful and less complicated than a level 2. Now, here's the thing about D20 Fantasy. D20 Fantasy, you've got a lot of different types of complexity at all levels. So a champion fighter in 5th edition is never really that complicated. A level 20 wizard is really complicated, right? And so I would say draw steel heroes at level 10 sit somewhere between the two in terms of complexity, but they're definitely a lot simpler than a level 20 spellcaster. But in terms of their power, the things you can do are equivalent and beyond, right? So we don't have, I would say there are some things that we don't exactly have an exact analogy for that are really powerful in D20 Fantasy, like the Wish Spell, right? So we don't have like we don't have too many things that are like, make your director's life hell by having them create something on the spot. But we do have like, hey, you can create a demiplane and take all your friends there, right? You can teleport anywhere in the world. What are some of the other cool
You can punch someone so hard that they unravel and they're forgotten from existence by everyone forever.
That one's a very good one.
How many squares can you push Ajax?
Well, we have the record right now. I think there's a leaderboard where someone has pushed Ajax 27 squares currently.
Yeah, so you can
Push him further.
punch one of the hardest creatures in the monster book like 135 feet.
Hang on, here we go. I think getting a haircut confused Windows recognition, and so I found the setting, which was if I don't recognize you, turn the monitor off. So I've been sitting here the whole time, and the monitor just goes boop, and I can see the little camera thing goes bleep bleep bleep, like it's like, are you there? Is that you? Is that you? And it's like, what's that? Who's that guy with the short hair?
You might be an imposter.
Could be. The imposter pasta. Stand by. Somebody asked a great question. How much of your character complexity, asks Mr. Fizzer, comes from items?
Oh, good question, Mr. Fizzer. One of our testers. Thank you, Mr. Fizzer. So how much of your complexity comes from items is a really good question. So in general, right, and there's a guide in there about how many items characters should have at each level of play, right? And so a lot of your power comes from your class, right?
Yeah.
And we kind of wanted to keep things that way, that like, you feel really cool because you're leveling up and you're expanding your own power. That feels very heroic. However, wielding a magic sword is cool, and we want that to feel cool too.
Of course.
So I would say it changes over time, because at the beginning you might not have any treasure, and so nothing, right? None of your complexity comes from treasure. But probably by the end of the game, I think maybe about 20% is a fair way to think of it, and mid game it might be about 10% of your complexity is coming from treasure.
I mean, what's interesting is that a lot of the items and gear that you get starts to key off of the same action economy. Like you have to use the same maneuver or action to activate this particular feature. Otherwise, when you start thinking about you're adding in new unique rules one by one, even if they're small, they do kind of start to exponentially multiply sort of their power level as a result. But as long as you as a director are kind of keeping tabs of how much you're giving to your players, it should stay relatively checked.
Yeah, and we account for that, right? This is if you were to stick to the recommendations that we give you in terms of treasures, the encounter building rules don't really need to change. Now, if you give them a lot of treasure, you probably will need to change your encounter building rules. But that's the idea, is that a lot of the time it's going to enhance your power, and you have consumable treasures like potions and stuff. But for the most part, each treasure you get is going to make things a little more complex, and you'll have more by the end of your career, because most of them don't go away.
Somebody asked a question, and I don't remember what it was. That was super good. So that's not useful. I wish Dale were here. Something that, so this is a good question from Shu, the viewer, but before we get there, one of the biggest differences between this game and the game you're probably already playing is that a first level character in Draw Steel is a 3-dimensional character with backstory. You are a competent hero. You're already famous, probably. You might only be locally famous, meaning just this town and the nearby towns have heard of you. But you are not a farmer that just put down the sword, just put down your plow yesterday and picked up a sword today. And one of the many side effects of that is first level play is always going to be fun. It's always going to be, it's not one of those things where you get bored of and you're like, my character at first level is so weak sauce because I don't get all my cool shit until third level, right? And we've all played a game that works like that. Nope, you get all your cool stuff in first level. You are a complete character at that point. And that means that first level is you're a lot beefier. You're a lot more heroic. There's more to learn. But we wanted to make it so that you would still enjoy looking forward to making a new character and playing it first level 3 years from now when this entire game system was completely transparent to you. Right now, it's all new. And so people are like, wow, this is a lot. It's like, yeah, it is. It is a lot, but the goal is it's always going to be fun to make a first level character. Speaking of which, should the viewer ask, what does play past 10th level look like?
We don't know yet.
Oh, good answer.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. So one thing that, and Jordy, you could talk about this, is like there's no limit to the amount of treasure and titles you could get. So yeah.
Yeah. So we talked about having like in lieu of an Immortals, supplement or whatever, having like infinite titles, right? And so having like level 10 encounters be like raids in an MMO. And so things are super challenging that give you titles that really change the nature of things you otherwise can't get. And those can set you up for like another like world-changing encounter. So we think that is sort of like a process worth exploring, once the game is out. And so I think we'll probably do some of that.
Yeah. In terms of the monster side of things too, we made sure to make sort of the highest level threats such as Ajax and the Meteor Dragon at level 10 really, really like intense and intimidating to fight against, just kind of set as a promise of like, okay, you're still going to get stronger than this. You're at level 10 now. What else could be coming next? So whatever it does end up looking like, it should be pretty exciting.
B. Hansen says, how late am I? You guys are awesome, and I already love everything about this game. Tactician all the way.
Yeah.
B. Hansen, you are my new favorite person. So people are asking questions about the VTT pricing. We don't know. There are things that we have goals, right? Like we believe that if you're a patron, that you should just get the VTT. Is that how it will work? We don't know yet. We're going to be noodling on pricing probably right up until it is real and it exists. But we want people to be able to just buy it. And we also want people to be able to just come on the Patreon and get it because they're giving us $8 a month. Where we actually land on that, you will know only a few weeks after we find out, which is months from now.
Yeah.
The Power Rule says, I've gotten to test the Codex. It is coming along nicely. Yep, there are lots of people in chat that have already used the Codex, and they like it and it works. That makes me very happy. So Daniel Friedman is impressed with the elevation tools. There's a thing they implemented in DM Hub where, like, if your dungeon or your adventure has multiple levels that are like level 2, level 3, level 4, that you can see one level from the other. Isn't that how elevation works? Yeah. And you can move from one map to the other. I thought that was really impressive.
Yeah. And then there's 2.5D parallaxing, so they can tall areas can be marked to parallax a little bit more. And then they just implement something that can basically do a little bit of stretching, so you can have like slopes and stuff kind of go up. So it gives a quasi 3D thing while being a very straightforward 2D map.
So Jordy, if we build a map of like a keep, right, and we're having a fight on top of the keep, and your tactician pushes a goblin off the keep, what happens in the Codex?
The Codex knows what floor they're on, so when they push off, they'll fall boom, 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 boom to the bottom floor.
And they'll take the damage when they hit the. Wow, that's awesome.
Are the Gods and Saints of Capital, asks Chrome Toaster, going to make it into the game or just the Vaslorian ones? No, the game assumes that you're going to be playing in some analog for medieval fantasy land, and that's, in our world, that's Vasloria. So we don't assume that there is a meaningful percentage of our audience that are already playing in an exclusively urban environment like Capital. There are some people out there doing that in various settings, but not most people. So we're going to pick one. We did that one. And hopefully in the future, you get to see all the rest of that stuff. And that's Sterling's 2063 says, do we have any updates on the Vasloria box set? That's sort of one of the things we've been talking about this week. We're not going to get into details about that. But I will tell you that Vazloria is like Europe. Right? So think about, that includes England and Scotland and Ireland, but it also includes like Portugal and Spain, and depending on your definition, things like Greece and Russia, and that's huge. And I don't think there's demand for looking at this environment, this huge environment, at all the same level of detail. No, I think most people are going to want to play in this part of Vazloria. And so whatever we do moving forward, it's going to focus on developing out those bits that you folks have already seen and know, and building that out, and then probably having a high level overview of the rest. And then we'll just see where the demand lies. Because, if Draw Steel turns into the kind of product where there's many tens of thousands of people playing it every week, then the sky's the limit. We could do virtually anything. But that seems like the most unlikely outcome, doesn't it? That probably it'll have a healthy life and we'll all be happy, but we won't get to make literally everything we can imagine. Our beast hearts on the table for Draw Steel.
Yes.
Are they on the table?
They're not on the table
No,
for the
this
core
table.
rules.
This table just has laptops and sunglasses on.
They won't be in the core rules, but if you look at the Beast Heart's design and you look at Draw Steel's design, there's a lot of stuff that we did in the Beast Heart. It was like, oh, it'd be cool if there was a whole RPG that worked this way, including the way Matt talked about heroic resources, right? In many ways, the first heroic resource we created was for the 5e Beast Heart, and it was ferocity.
To that end, take a look at the werewolf if you haven't already. That has a lot of Beast Heart inspirations in there.
Yeah. It's got a Beast Heart in their chest.
Riley Peters asks, is there a plan for something to help people who are wholly unfamiliar with Draw Steel get onboarded into the RPG? Yeah, I think, to a certain extent. So a year ago, we had the idea, this is actually Lars's idea, that the kind of starting adventure that we would use was the Fall of Black Bottom, where your characters are there when Ajax sacks Black Bottom and the Chain of Acheron are trying to retreat, and you could play a member of the Chain of Acheron in your own game, or you could just play a hero that was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And we did that, and that's the Fall of Black Bottom adventure, which was in the last packet. But it is definitely a hot start, right? It is bam, action, go. And it was super cool and fun. Well, it was super cool and fun for us to work on. It was super cool and fun for those members of the community who are the hardcore users, right? The folks who are really plugged into the lore. They know who Ajax is. They knew what Black Bottom was, and they loved that. And they were also, by the way, the people who were the most educated on Draw Steel. They had been following development the whole time. So it comes with some pre-gens, and they were ready. It was the opposite for people that were brand new and who knew nothing about this stuff. They were overwhelmed. They didn't have the context for any of this stuff. And so one of the things we talked about this week, which I feel like we know as much as we know anything about the future, is that we need more than one starting product. We need more than one starter adventure. We need one starter adventure for the hardcore fans who are, they're like, no, I don't need to be taught what the power roll is. I know that, right? They want to get right into the action, and that's probably going to be some version of the Fall of Black Bottom. And then we need a real starter adventure for people that don't know anything about this game. And that's probably some version of the Delian Tomb. And there may yet be a future product that is like for Target, that is an even more basic, even more straightforward. Here's how dice work, that kind of thing. But that's much more speculative. And even that would probably be some version of the Delian Tomb. But it might be its own thing. Will there be a community module support for the Codex? Yes, you will be able to make your own stuff inside the Codex and share it with people. And my personal goal is that you'll be able to create your own content and sell it in the Codex.
Yep. It uses Lua. It's a pretty straightforward scripting system.
Yep.
We used it back in the
Yes,
day.
we did. Yes, we did. And as somebody whose first languages were Apple Basic, Pascal, and Fortran, because it was the 80s, a typeless language, how can an array be a Boolean? That doesn't make any sense. It sort of does make sense if you think about it. But yeah, that really baked my noodle. Let's see. Anything else? Nerd. Oh, Jesus. See, that's why my YouTube makes its own decisions whether or not I should be caught up to chat, and it just yeah.
Oh yeah.
how much game testing was done with pen and paper versus the codex. We haven't used the codex to do any testing.
Yeah.
I mean, the people working on the codex use it all the time.
Yeah.
Right. But those of us working on the core rules, we used Owlbear Rodeo, and every time, once every 3 months, we got together in person. And this is the first time we've gotten together in person for a week and we didn't play Draw Steel.
Yep.
Because the rules are kind of done. And but the previous times was very intense. We would each run the game, right? So we were each players, we were each directors, sometimes more than one person in a day would run for everybody else. And we would learn so much so quickly. And I know I'm the one that does most of the talking in these streams, but to double click on that for a second, that was where I felt like I was being the design director a lot, because we were all sitting around the table at the same time in person with the character sheets and rolling dice, and I would say stuff like, guys, it can't work like this, right? We have to come up with some way that we can get this kind of customization that the director likes, so that they have something like a heroic resource like the players do, but without all this crazy bookkeeping. And that's where we tamped down on that stuff, and it was playing in person that made us make that progress so quickly. Toot. Do we have a pitch, asks Redhead Media, to tell people why they should play Draw Steel over Dungeons and Dragons if D&D is all they've ever played? I do. I have a couple. However, in this context, I think that, and I understand why you're asking. That's an incredibly useful question to ask, and I'm glad this came up, because I often tell people in my own live streams, I tell people on the Patreon, I say this in the Discord, that you watching this stream are probably more and better educated on what MCDM does and what we're about than the people in your gaming group. Right? That's pretty typical. It's usually in most gaming groups, there's one person who's the one that goes online and reads all this stuff and brings that to the rest of the team. And so there are often people who are like super excited by Draw Steel, and they show up and they're like, I don't know how to get my players excited. And they really want to play because they're in the Patreon, they see the rules, they really want to play it, but their players are still in Seattle land, right? And that's where their hearts are. And they're like, I'm having a hard time convincing them. I'm like, relax, wait. You don't have a finished laid out PDF yet. You don't have any of the diagrams, any of the stuff, any of the graphic design that makes understanding a new game easy and fun. Because once you have the finished PDF, or even better, once you have the finished book in your hand and you can just hand it to your players, they will fall in love. Not all of them, some of them won't, but many of them will open the book up and go, oh, I can be this character. I can do this and Draw Steel. Yes. So just be patient, right? And the reason in other words, the longer you wait to show your friends what this game's about, the more likely they are going to like it and get excited, because the more polished a thing you are bringing them. And a corollary to that is do we have a pitch for I do have pitches for that, but it's sort of like, we don't think people who are playing D&D, that's not a problem to solve. If you like D20 Fantasy, if you like 5th edition, knock yourself out. We do too. We just got really frustrated with it, especially as developers, because we thought it could be better. And for me personally, one of my pitches is you don't miss your turn. There's no, in D20 Fantasy, the D20 is the do I get to take my turn die. And it's designed on purpose so that you have a 35% chance, by the math, of doing nothing on your turn. I mean, you got to move and drink a potion maybe. And otherwise you just sit there. And that means you only have to have 2 or 3 bad rolls. And you didn't do anything all night. Our game does not work that way. You are always making progress with every die roll. The only question is, it's more like a race. The only question is, are you making progress faster than the monsters are? And that creates an enormous dramatic tension that everybody likes. Everybody, you can see people in chat will, I think, affirm this. The people at the table whose turn it is not are paying a lot more attention than they are in a D20 Fantasy game, because they have so many more options. They have triggers they can use that we designed on purpose to be broadly applicable, even when it's not your turn. And so the battle is changing enormously on a turn-by-turn basis. So that's my pitch, is that there is no, do I miss my turn die? You can still have a bad turn. There are people online who, they act like not missing is some kind of like, that missing is core to the experience of something or whatever. You can absolutely still have a bad turn and Draw Steel that just meant you got tier 1 results. But you did something. You made some progress.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is a deadly game. You can definitely die in it. Ask any of our playtesters, right? There's we have an ongoing for our coordinator team, right, which is a sort of our internal testing team. There is a list of the deaths, and Matt has 2 characters on that list. Yeah.
Basically, anytime I play an Orc Fury. In my defense, it used to be that your Fury went away at the end of the turn. I think it still might be that way.
Yeah.
But I was always trying to open the door and turn on the next encounter to build up even more Fury. Because originally the Fury got stamina and movement the more Fury it had. So the more Fury I had, the harder I was to kill and the more movement I had. So I was trying to awaken the other mobs, so to speak, in MMO terms. I was trying to pull other encounters into our group on purpose. So I was always like, what's over here? What if I climb this rope? And that meant I always died. I died over and over again. Gosh. There was somebody, yep. If you guys see any questions you want to answer, by the way, you don't have to wait for me. I would say also to the Redhead Media question about why you should play Draw Steel over Dungeons and Dragons, I have a very, very high level abstract answer, which is that I think our game delivers on the fantasy that D20 Fantasy is promising but doesn't deliver on. Right? I think like the promise of D20 Fantasy is you get to play a heroic character and do heroic stuff. But in point of fact, what you're often doing is bookkeeping, right? You're worrying about things like spell slots and nonsense that your character would never worry about. But D&D 5th edition especially is a very complicated game. I think our game is about as complicated. The difference between our game and their game, I think, is that much of their complexity is in service to the legacy brand. Why does it work this way? Because it's always worked that way and we don't want to change it. Whereas our complexity is in service to play. We made it this way because it makes the game more fun to play. So for instance, before Draw Steel existed, but we were working on it and people had questions, they would ask, how long does combat last? Right? And that question is very heavily coded. What they mean is, I hope combat is short, because I'm currently playing a game where long combats are boring and painful and I hate them, right? And I quote, this is a user from our Discord who I quote all the time, and they said, when I'm done with a 5th edition encounter, it doesn't matter if it went well or badly. Even if an encounter went really well, I, as a dungeon master, especially once you get past like 5th level, my brain is completely fried, and I just need to not think about this game for the next couple of days. And then eventually I'll come back to getting excited. And they said, when I play Draw Steel at the end of the encounter, as a director, I just want to run again, right? My brain is fizzing. Yeah, because our complexity is in service to play. And we see it in the people who play the game and in the audience. The people stopped wondering how long, people stopped, once Draw Steel was real and they could play it, people stopped asking how long do combats last because they were having fun fighting monsters. Anyway, I just talked for a long time.
I see a question here from Patrick, which is, how many players, what's the range of players Draw Steel will support? And so, we do a lot of testing, and most of the testing is with 4 to 5 players, right? And that's sort of the sweet spot for Draw Steel. However, you will be able to play with fewer players, as many as, you could play with 1 player and 1 director because we've done a lot of work. Jordy has done a lot of work on retainers, right? And I'll let Jordy talk about that. In terms of how many you can have, you could, in theory, have many, many players, but it will start to take a long time because it is a turn-based game, right? So we generally think like 6 is the cap for combat not taking forever.
That being said, we have a system that helps balance that as well, thanks to Jordy, with DTOs.
Right.
So
Dynamic terrain objects.
Yeah, you don't have to add more monsters onto the field and
Correct.
overwhelm yourself. You can add more field to the field.
Yeah, you can have more things that are actively, pieces of the terrain that are actively doing things that you can interact with.
Yeah, retainers are simple to run companion characters, right? So they're equivalent if you're running the monsters, a captain and a squad. So they're designed to go on your turn. And so if you have less than 5 people, which is a sort of target number, you can balance the math. But let's say you have 3 players, you give 2 of them retainers, you get 5, right? And so the retainers are a little bit weaker than a player, but they go on the same turn as a player, right? So that the turn optimization kind of makes up for it. And so I think you get the equivalent. And then the terrain objects are your happy everyday traps, pools of lava, corrosive acid, the throne of On, things that sort of change the nature of magic in the area. So there's like a lot of fun change-ups there.
Nate Simon says, my friend is playing a Miminek Null in my game. He has 9 speed and a lot of the grapple abilities, which combos well with our Fury. Nate, you're awesome. We just saw people reporting back that they played a game against Ajax. And I think it was the Fury hit Ajax and sent him flying back 27 squares. 27 squares, which that's for a 10th level game. I was like, yeah, that seems about right to me.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, that is super cool.
Pretty cool.
Do you guys see any good questions?
Let's see.
So Jeff Albright asked a question that I think betrays a lot of like the kind of like if you've only played D20 Fantasy, it's hard to kind of imagine anything else, right? Which I completely understand. If you didn't miss, but you got a tier 1 result, how do you narrate something like that? It bounces off their armor or shield? Well, maybe, yeah. Have you ever watched an action scene in any movie ever? Like when the bad guys throw a lot of punches, but it's not like every punch knocks somebody out. Nope, it's just like John Wick. John Wick is a great example. The Avengers are a great example. Indiana Jones is a great example. There are some bad guys that Indiana Jones hits and they go out like that. Typically, those are minions. There are other where it takes a lot of punches and a lot of him being clever and trying different stuff in order to eliminate this bad guy. Same thing in our game.
Yeah, a big thing that helped when we stopped using the term hit points and started using the term
Stamina, yeah.
Right? Because that's what's going down. It's your stamina that is going down. So yeah, that is a perfect way to say like, oh, you block it with your shield. You know, now there's your arm is ringing right from that thing. You know, so yeah, that's damage. Reducing your stamina is an important thing to know that like, yeah, not everybody has a zillion arrows in them. Right?
Yeah, made you a little sleepy.
We were going to call them telomeres, but no, people wouldn't have gotten that. Renee Wojak, I love the fact that I can tell stories about I can relay stories to you folks about what the people in our Patreon and our Discord have said, and they're in here. Like, so Renee Wojak is the Fury that knocked Ajax back 27 squares. That's awesome. I love it when people in chat can see that these are real comments made by real people. Yeah. Somebody asked how easy it is to run draw steal in different settings. I mean, I think that the classes, character creation, the monsters. I mean, look at Flea Mortals, right? Almost all the monsters in Flea Mortals are in Draw Steel. Yeah. And the archetypes that you find in D20 Fantasy, you will find in our game. So I think it's very straightforward. I mean, you know, our setting is just a very specific instantiation of a generic fantasy world. Yeah. We did it that way. Imagine a generic fantasy world that just has a lot of flavor and personality, right? Just like yours. Same thing.
Yeah, we talk about no oatmeal, which isn't. It doesn't mean that you can't do it anyplace else. We're just giving you a specific option because it gives you something to react to, right? We feel like if you give you a super generic option, it doesn't have enough character for you to understand what you're trying to go for. Something specific you can change works better.
Sean Young, I loved you in Blade Runner, says, I played a Devil Fury, a pit fighting brawler knocking people around. Love that stuff. I mean, we've now been streaming for over an hour. Is there anything you guys want to talk about before we wrap it up? Are there any other, if we see any good questions from chat, we can jump on them, but
yeah. I think they're just reminiscing on all the cool stuff that they've been doing in combat. Sam
McGurran said, seen lots of Eberron stuff for Draw Steel. I have not. That's really cool. I would like to see more of that stuff.
It's got kind of a heroic vibe, you know, Paul.
Yeah. I mean, I think Draw Steel is perfect for Eberron.
I do too. Yeah, and Eberron is my favorite official D&D setting.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah. So it makes me really happy when I see.
Let's go. Have we talked about this on stream before? Let's go around the table. So Eberron is your favorite official D&D setting.
Yeah, from Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah. Willie, what is yours?
My favorite setting?
Yeah. Your favorite world to play in that ideally is an official D&D world.
I mean, I've been doing a lot of my best work in Faerun, so
Forgotten Realms.
Yeah, no, it's fertile enough to kind of make it my own.
It's not Spelljammer.
It's not Spelljammer.
There's clowns.
Yeah, because I made my own clowns. I don't need their clowns. I've got my own.
There are people very early in the chat who are like, "When is the nose coming out?" As you see.
Dark Sun.
Dark Sun.
Really? Yeah, I love Dark Sun. Yeah. Mine is Birthright. I mean, if you want to know what Vaziloria is like, it's my version of Birthright.
Yeah.
Birthright is a relatively obscure setting that came out during the age of settings that TSR was doing in the 90s. And it was based on a series of novels that I don't think ever got published by Rich Baker, which is different, not that Rich Baker.
Oh yeah.
Not that Rich Baker.
And
so one of the things I really didn't like about Birthright was the fact that he was it seemed as though he was forced to kind of shoehorn all the classic D&D nonsense into there so that it would be a D&D game. But I really liked the idea that the players were expected to be rulers of some sort. That didn't necessarily mean a noble person. That means you could run a thieves guild. You could run a wizard's order. You could be the head of a church. And my friends and I never really used the rules from Birthright because they were a little bit too crufty, sitting on top of rules that were already quite crufty. But I just loved that setting. I ran that setting without using. We had our own warfare rules. We had our own rules for like domain management and stuff like that. But yeah, I love that setting. I love the names. I love the, I was one of the only people I knew that could pronounce all the names, right? Because I was obsessed with it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool.
Will the VTT have ways to join or find or create public games? We've been talking about something like that not the way you're imagining. So that kind of like, you're not going to be able to it's not going to be like Hearthstone, right? Or I guess like Balatro or whatever, where you can just click play and it will match you with other people live, and it doesn't matter what day of the week or what time of day it is. But without giving too much of our thinking away, and we have no plans, just some idle thoughts, we might be able to synthesize that kind of experience through a targeted release schedule. And I will say no more about that. But we do think we do think that there might be an opportunity for, at certain times of the year, based on when certain products drop, to simulate that experience of I just click and I get into a game. But otherwise, we already have our own looking for group channel. Specifically, I think we have one for Drawsteel, for people that are for directors that are looking for players, and vice versa. I agree, Zetasophos. I think Darkstone would work really well in Drawsteel. In fact, more than once, I would talk about what my dope-ass Dark Sun character did, and how do I do that in Drawsteel. We said Robert Praetorius Jr., a.k.a. King Rob, says, you said the rules are pretty much done. Do we know how long until we have a full release? We hope by the middle of the year. Middle to 3/4 of the way through the year.
Yeah, there's somebody here is asking options for level 0 or funnel campaigns. I will say that Drawsteel is probably not a game that lends itself to a funnel, which is a style of character creation where you make 4 level 0 characters and then they go through a meat grinder dungeon and the one you have left is your character. But we have talked in the past about a desire to create level 0 rules at some point. But again, they probably won't be part of the core.
Will there be MCDM presence at future conventions? I mean, almost certainly.
Probably, yeah.
I don't like traveling that much, and I don't like being away from home that much. I like being in other places. Like, I would love to go to Gen Con if at the end of the day I was back home with my cats.
Yeah.
So that's my attitude. Is I love meeting people. I love going to conventions. I just don't like traveling and being away from them.
Yeah.
So convention presence probably, but actually the way that tends to happen is there are people here at this company who want to go to a show, and so we see, can we make something official happen? Generally speaking, we don't have that kind of. We don't have like a staff member here that makes sure we go to conventions. That might happen, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but this year, right? Willie and Jordy, along with a bunch of other people at MCDM, went to Gen Con. And Willie and I were at PAX Unplugged.
PAX U.
Yeah. So you may be able to find us, who knows where, next year. We don't know yet.
Carlos Gasparoni says, I often feel like D&D does next to nothing to encourage the DM to set combats in anything other than a big empty room. Is Drawsteel strongly different than this?
Yes.
It is 180 degrees away, because if you do that in Drawsteel, your players are going to get bored.
Yes.
Because Drawsteel sort of needs things like doors and walls and pillars for you to throw people into. Because a big part of Drawsteel is tossing other people around and being tossed around. One of your core attributes, not technically an attribute, it's not technically an attribute. It's not like strength, intelligence, wisdom, death. But one of your core stats is stability, which is your ability to resist being moved around, right? So if you so you get knocked around a lot, because if you watch, the difference between Indiana Jones, John Wick, and the Avengers is enormous, right? These are Indiana Jones is not technically an action hero, right? He's an adventure hero. He's a pulp hero, right? And all of these heroes get thrown around a lot. John Wick is an assassin. He's a gun kata dude, and he gets thrown around a lot because there's always a point where they're right next to each other and they're out of ammo, whatever. And now it's grappling and throwing, and that's our game. Our game is you get thrown around a lot. You get thrown into walls, you break walls, and stuff like that. And we wanted very early on. It was one of the first things that worked, by the way, was when we ran combats and we were arguing about things like the dice and the action economy, throwing people around, getting knocked into walls, getting knocked through walls, worked and was already super, super fun. And for me personally, it's one of those things where I can't go back. I can't go back to that static, that thing you're talking about where it's,
I mean, your shadows are going to be pissed off if they don't have anything to like hide behind. And on the other side of the table too, like all of your different roles for,
There's one of Jordy's ancestral countrymen.
Notizo, just greeting to the incredible MCDM team from Serbia. Zdravo. Zdravo. Dobro.
He's talking his crazy moon language.
But like I was saying, like you as a director, you're just going to not want to keep all of your monsters in sort of that square room either. Right? You have a whole bunch of different monster roles that you have to play with, and you want to make sure they're living up to their expectations. Like an ambusher is going to want to ambush the heroes, and you can't do that in a wide open space.
Yeah. Also, if you're running D&D combat in an empty room, stop it.
Yeah.
Unless you're playing NetHack and you got to the big room, which is one of the best rooms. But that's another type of D&D. So this is a great question from Left Brownie. Do we think the dynamic hazards, they're called DT, in our game they're called dynamic terrain objects, could be their own encounter without monsters? I think absolutely. Yeah.
100%.
Because like a dynamic terrain object, and you get a sampling of them, a variety of them in the monsters book. They can be things like, a pool of oil. Right? They can be things like a ballista, right? But they can also be things like the black obelisk is going wah, 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 wah. It's like distorting time and space and stuff like that. It's any physical object that doesn't really move around, but you can interact with and does its own thing. There's a whole variety of them.
Imagine a pool of ice with rams and then acid pools on the side, and there's some time to just have to get through to the chompers.
Yeah, I was going to say, basically, if you wanted to, you could build a draw steel map that was Robo Rally, right? You could absolutely do that, and it would be totally sensible and work.
A Rube Kobold machine? Instead
of Rube Goldberg, Rube Kobold, I like that. Pesto Enthusiast is talking about knocking people around. I think Pesto was in a game where where the talent, who is our silent assist, knocked somebody, was it through the roof or through the floor?
Yeah, they pulled them down like through the roof of a building, right? They were outside and
they used their telekinetics to pull somebody down through the roof of the building into somebody below them, knocking both of them out. And I was like, that's draw steel, baby.
This is not actually a serious question, but how likely is it that roll will be an Eastern European analog? We talked about that today.
Yeah, pretty likely. I mean, when we were talking about how, I don't think you're going to go to all of Vasloria in the first 2 years. I don't think there's demand for that. That would be ridiculous. But the exception is Roll, because Roll is where Count Rodar von Glauer is from. And it's classic, mountainous Carpathian werewolves and vampires adventuring. I think that stuff is inevitable. When it happens, I don't know, but it's inevitable. We've now been streaming for about an hour and a half. That sounds like about a goodly amount of time. Anything else you guys want to talk about?
I feel pretty I feel really good about this game, and honestly, I don't know that I would have said that before last month, because I knew we were, and every week felt better and better and better. But now reading the results, seeing people's stories, it's really humming, and it's really in a place where I am really, really excited about it. And obviously, I would be, right. If I'm not, then the game is really in trouble. But yeah, so it's really nice. So if you are folks out there who are curious about checking it out, now is a great time to check it out, or wait until the full game is out there. You will be able to probably get some percentage of the game by checking it out on various platforms and things like that. And to those of you in the chat who are sharing your experiences and talking about it, thank you so much for playtesting and doing all that stuff for us. That was really great.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to play the game right now, you can go join the Patreon, and all of the rules. We are feature complete and I think content complete. So now all we're doing is polishing. We're fixing bugs. We're listening to feedback. The whole game is on Patreon, $8. You can also pre-order the game on BackerKit, and you get the backer packet. Because the way we do things is we consider the patrons as our next to last stage of testing. right? So we do our own testing just here, and then we have our own contract testers that we pay. They work and source with volunteers, and so they're constantly testing the game. And then when we feel like it's in a good place, we send it to the patrons, and there are thousands of them. And then they play it, and we take that feedback and polish even more, and then it goes to the backers. And the backers get the most polished version of the game. So right now, the patrons have the entire game. Backers have the entire game except levels 4 to 10 of character creation. They have all the monsters, they have all the treasures, they have all the rewards, and all that
level
stuff.
6 of monsters?
Oh, up to level 6 of monsters on Backer Kit?
So you have characters to level 3, but we did give you up to level 6 because
Of monsters.
you can get more. You
Sure,
can
you
fight
can have-
higher level monsters
Yep,
because
yep.
your victories go up. Yeah.
Yep. So that's the order of operations. Is the patrons now have the entire game because they're our last round of testing. The backers, we still listen to backer feedback, obviously, but like this, the next thing the backers see, we think, will be the finished PDF. So they'll go from only having levels 1 to 3 to having, oh, it's done, the game's done, it's been laid out and arted and everything.
Yeah, go play it. Try fighting some more dogs. I think you'll have a good time.
Yeah, somebody was asking about which of the different factions of monsters were our favorites, and mine 100% the war dogs because
Favorite?
Yeah.
Are you making me choose my babies?
it's the rat people.
The rain ones are really good. I like how they are in the game right now. However, I would say that like if you're looking for an interesting and technical fight, I love the hobgoblins and how they were
Oh, cool.
instantiated.
Yeah, the hobgoblins are great.
Yeah.
They're really, and they're fun to run. The hobgoblins
Yeah.
are super fun to run. Yeah.
I can't pick.
For me, it's the undead. I really like the undead. Yeah. The undead are show up in droves and do a lot of really fun unique undead stuff that feels horrific, which is great.
I like both the war dogs and the dwarves because they really synergize with Jason's art and kind of direction for that.
That too.
Yeah, it's great.
So yeah, somebody was saying the ancestries and draw skill do not match my homebrew. How modifiable will it be? Well, I mean, if you look at the it's real easy to make an ancestry. And it's fun because of the Build-A-Bear stuff. It is. I think ancestries are going to be one of the most homebrewed things because it's a small chunk of gameplay. It's not like a class, which is 10 levels. So you got a little something to work on. You have a lot of variety, right? Because each ancestry in Draw Steel, you have many options, and you spend some points to buy a couple, right? So coming up with those options is fun.
If you want to like homebrew some new ancestries, what you should do is kind of sit down and try to mix and match a couple of the different options across different species, as it were, and see what that feels like.
Well, it's like when you need a monster on the fly,
Yeah.
and you're like, well, this monster doesn't exist, but I'll just take a hobgoblin and kind of reskin it. Well, you could do the same thing with an ancestry. You could make a wholly new ancestry just by grabbing little bits and pieces of the options from existing ancestries.
Yeah, in fact, that would be the way. We don't have half elves canonically, right? And there's a lot of reasons for that. But if you're like, well, I really need a half elf, it would be pretty easy to take some elf traits, take some human traits, and smash them together, and you would be good to go.
Yep, and I think, I think that's it.
That's it.
I think that's it. I think that's the stream, folks. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out. I hope you got some value out of this and you had fun hanging out with us, talking about our new favorite game. I'm incredibly, I don't think I've worked on a game that I am as proud of and that I have as much fun playing. I've worked on games that I was as proud of as this, but not that I loved playing as much as I love Draw Steel. So I think that's it, folks. Thanks for watching.
Goodbye.
Until next time. Be seeing you.
Bye.